Picture someone living a life in such a way that it resonates. It feels authentic and interesting and resilient, that they're not the type of person who's going to look back at the end of their life and say, "What did I do?" Most of today's productivity advice is about fast productivity. It is about getting more stuff done on the short term, measured in days, maybe weeks. Deep Work by Cal Newport is about slow productivity. It is about consistently setting aside time to work without distraction, producing output that moves the needle. Deep Work is measured in years and has the potential to outperform fast productivity by several orders of magnitude. I've organized this book on a page into two big parts. Part 1 is about the case for deep work. Part 2 is about implementing deep work into your everyday. I've split both parts into 4 sections. Part 1 starts with an introduction to deep work and just defining the concepts of deep work and shallow work, then continues on to talk about the value of deep work, then explores why deep work is not so common even though it's valuable, and closes off with a discussion about deep work not only being valuable but also meaningful. We'll kick off part 2 with a discussion about willpower and then move on to basic systems that support deep work. We will then explore the importance of having downtime, then dive into the issue of social media, and finally we will close with a couple of recommendations or best practices for reducing shallow work, making space for deep work. Automation is all around us. Think of the advent of self-driving cars or the analytics you get by simply typing in a Google query, or personal assistants like Alexa, Siri, or Google Assistant. Employers are becoming increasingly likely to hire new machines instead of new people. So how do you become a winner in this new economy? Cal highlights 3 groups of people who are going to be winners. Number 1 are the high-skilled workers who are good at working together with technology. Number 2 are the superstars who are the best in their field at what they do. And the third group are the people with access to capital who are able to invest their money into these new technologies. Deep Work lays out a path to winning for the first 2 groups. It doesn't talk about the deployment of capital. So let's start with some definitions. Since the publishing of the book, many people have started to understand deep work and deep life in a much broader sense than defined by Cal. Cal defines deep work in a very narrow way. Deep work is professional activities performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that pushes your cognitive capabilities to their limit. These efforts create new value, improve your skill, and are hard to replicate. Cal puts deep work in contrast with shallow work, and shallow work is defined as non-cognitively demanding, logistical style tasks that are often performed in a state of distraction. And these efforts are typically low in value and are easy to replicate. Cal also makes the point that if you spend enough time in this frantic, distracted, shallow work state, then you permanently lose your ability to do deep work, or in other words, it takes lots of effort and deliberate training to train yourself to be able to do deep work again. Throughout the book, Cal makes references to a number of famous people known for their deep work practices, and he also underlines that those who create valuable things with their minds are usually not haphazard in their practices. They have very robust work practices, and these work practices create the value. Some examples that you can read in the book is, for example, Bill Gates is known for his Think Weeks, where twice a year he goes away with his books and notes and thinks. Carl Jung had this house in Bollingen where he retreated regularly to have time to think and work. And the list goes on with all the other examples here. There are three things that you need to keep in mind about today's economy. First, that everyone is distracted because of email, because of social media, because of our fast-paced lives. Second, it's no longer sufficient to learn something in school and do the same job for the next 40 years. You need to have the skill to learn new, complex skills every 5 to 10 years. And third, with the advent of internet, those who perform the best in their field stand out. When you're looking for something, this is extremely convenient. With a couple of quick Google searches, you can find those who stand out in their field. You're going to find the best YouTube videos, you're going to find the best suppliers. But if you're selling your skills on the internet, this is a huge risk. If you're not the best in your field, then you're going to be left behind. Those who are the best are going to profit from the new economy the most. And deep work addresses all three of these areas. Deep work is an essential tool in learning hard things quickly. Your brain consists of millions and millions of neurons. Each neuron has this long cable called an axon that connects the neuron to other neurons, and you have electrical signals traveling along the axon. When the axon is covered with myelin sheath, then the signal travels faster and the connection becomes stronger. When you're learning a new skill, what you're doing is you're myelinating the relevant circuits, the relevant pathways in your brain, and this myelination is what cements in the learning. By having focused attention on the subject, you will force the relevant circuits in your brain to fire again and again and again. And this regular use, this regular firing of the circuits will increase the speed of myelination, and therefore you will be able to learn things quickly. If, however, during your studies you are distracted by looking at Twitter or Facebook or your email or just being on the phone, whatever, then different areas in your brain are going to be active, and this focused attention, this focused exercise to help myelination will be much weaker, and as a result, you will learn much slower. Deep work also helps you produce at an elite level. In a very simple formula, high quality work produced is equal the time you spend working and your intensity of focus. The concept that you need to understand here is called attention residue, which was investigated by Sophie Leroy at the University of Minnesota. In their experiment, they gave people puzzles. One group had undistracted time to complete the puzzles. The other group was interrupted by a silly simple question that, oh, you forgot to fill this out on this form or something similar. The group that was undistracted completed the puzzles in much better quality than the other group. What Sophie and team found was that it takes over 20 minutes for your mind to refocus on the activity that you are working on after a distraction. So what does this mean? When you're constantly checking your social media and email, like checking it every 5 minutes, it means that you are simply never able to achieve your peak performance. You're performing at this very low level, and what you can see here is this is the intensity of your focus. This is the maximum level of your cognitive capabilities, and this is the level at which you are able to concentrate on the task at hand. And this area under the curve is the overall achievement that you're able to produce in this amount of time. When you're able to focus fully on your work, then after the attention residue wears off, you reach peak focus, and you can keep that peak focus for typically 60 or 90 minutes. Even professionals who are very well practiced in deep work cannot do more than 4 or 5 hours, because after a time fatigue will hit in and your output will decrease. But the point here is to see the difference between the achievement in the same amount of time. In one case, you're achieving little. In the other case, you're achieving a huge lot. This was an eye-opener for me. I did feel that constant distraction is a problem. I didn't previously understood the devastating effect of social media. And I was also a bit skeptical about this, so I did a bit of further research. And I have to say that what I found underlines and supports Cal's assertions that indeed attention residue is killing your performance. And if you're able to put aside constant distractions, then your output will be significantly higher. So if deep work is so valuable, then why is it that our modern work environments do not support deep work? Think about open space offices, think about the constant overload of email, and think about how companies are now implementing instant messaging across the board, so you get even more distractions. The issue is that there's a metric black hole. It is extremely difficult to measure the output, the productivity of knowledge workers, and for this reasons, companies and people fall back to the industrial age definition of productivity, and they measure it by the level of busyness. And also there's this principle of least resistance, meaning that in the moment, instant messaging, getting a response to your question immediately feels productive. Setting up regular meetings to get update on a project feels like a good way to organize your day. Running your day out of the inbox, meaning you take one email after the other and that drives the work during the day, feels comfortable, it feels easy, and it feels productive because you're clicking emails, you're getting them out of the way. But their effect is devastating, because what happens with all these meetings and emails is your day gets fractured. You don't have time for deep work because you have all these other activities going on during the day, and the end result is you end up in this state of constant distraction and your overall achievement remains low. And people do this because this is the easiest way to measure productivity and to feel good about your output. The other issue that Cal highlights is that we've come to accept new technology as the equivalent of good and better. They're simply no longer discussing the trade-offs surrounding new technology, comparing the new efficiencies with the problems that are introduced by new technology. But if it's new technology, we accept it to be good technology, and this unfiltered dependence on new technology is driving behaviors that are not good for productivity and for deep work. And finally, deep work is not only financially lucrative, but deep work is also meaningful. It is a life well lived. Taking the neurological case, it is not your circumstances that define how you think and feel, but it's what you focus on. If you focus on social media, if you focus on the news, then you're going to have this constant anxiety. If you focus on things that are interesting and meaningful to you, and that is what fills your life and your mind, then you're going to feel good. The psychological case is based on the work of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. They equipped people with pagers, and whenever the pager went off, the subjects had to take notes of what they're doing and how they're feeling. The interesting finding from this study was that even though people say they don't like to work and they like leisure time, objectively speaking, people felt good much more frequent when they were doing work and much less frequent when they were doing nothing, having their free time. Csikszentmihalyi built this concept of flow based on this research, and flow is this state of mind when you're doing something meaningful and challenging that is right on the borderline of your level of skill and the difficulty of the challenge. So when you're doing something that is not too hard, because if the challenge is too hard, you'll be anxious, and if the challenge is too easy, you're going to be bored. But when you're doing something that matches your skill level and stretches you a little, then you're going to be in this state of flow, and flow is a significant contributing factor to feeling good and satisfied. And finally, the philosophical case for deep work is put forward by Dreyfus and Kelly in All Things Shining. And here the point is that it is not the wood or the rock or whatever you're working on is what's noble, but the craftsmanship can be noble. Deep work is a way of being a craftsman in your own subject. So that completes part one, the case for deep work. Let me just very quickly recap. First of all, in our new economy, if you don't practice deep work, you're going to be left behind. You will not be able to compete with machines. Deep work will give you two superpowers. One is you're going to be able to learn complex skills fast, and this has a biological reason. And second, it will help you perform at an elite level, and that is because of the devastating effect of attention residue. If you can get rid of attention residue by focusing on one topic, your output is going to increase drastically. Deep work is not practiced by companies because it's hard to measure, and it's more convenient to have instant messaging and frequent meetings and working from your mailbox, as well as we lost our ability to question new technology. And finally, deep work is meaningful, and we covered a neurological, a psychological, and a philosophical reason for that. So let's now move on to the second part, talking about the implementation of deep work. When implementing a deep work practice, it is essential to understand that we have a finite amount of willpower that becomes depleted during the day. We start off with lots of willpower, and as the day progresses, our willpower decreases. As humans, we have all sorts of urges throughout the day, and recent studies have shown that next to eating, sleeping, sex, or taking a break, social media is on the top 5 list of urges that we have throughout the day. Unless you have a robust framework of doing deep work, you're not going to have the willpower to resist the temptation of constant distraction. Let's look at the different approaches that will help you overcome this issue with willpower. Let's start with a discussion about systems to support deep work. Deciding on your deep work philosophy is the first step. Cal mentions 4 different philosophies. The monastic philosophy is the most drastic philosophy, and for example, Neil Stephenson is known for this, but other fiction writers as well. This is a philosophy where you completely disconnect. You don't need to move to an island. You can disconnect at home as well, turn off the Wi-Fi, turn off the network. But basically, this is an approach when you constantly live off the grid from a networked tools perspective. The bimodal philosophy is a bit more practical for everyday life. In this case, you spend a couple of days doing deep work and being disconnected, but the other days you're doing your normal job, your busy work. Carl Jung is a good example for this. He kept his practice and he was working with patients, which is typical busy work, but also he regularly retreated to his house in Bollingen to be able to do deep work. I found the rhythmic philosophy to be the most practical of them all. In this case, you alternate between deep work and shallow work within a day, but the way you do this is you set aside a fixed period of time for deep work. For example, you start your morning with deep work, you get up at 5, and from 5 to 7 or 5 to 8, you do deep work, and then you continue on with your normal work. Making it a habit, having a set time to do deep work is extremely important because of the willpower that we discussed. Habits are much easier to maintain than making a decision every day. And finally, the journalistic philosophy, which I demonstrate with this black belt here, because it's only for pros, is to alternate your day between deep work and shallow work as it fits your agenda. The example that Cal mentions in the book is the example of Walter Isaacson, who was able to step out and do some deep work when he had time, do some writing, and then step back in to his busy work. This requires lots of practice, and this is really not the right approach to start deep work with. Probably the most practical way to get started is to implement a rhythmic philosophy, and maybe based on your findings, move to the bimodal or to the journalistic philosophy, whatever fits you more. Cal gives a couple of good recommendations in terms of how you can help deep work. First of all, he mentions that deep work is not necessarily working alone. In fact, by working side by side with someone, you can help each other reach even deeper levels of deep work, but you need to be able to alternate between having alone time and having together time. In the book, he talks about the architecture of Bell Labs, which was built around this hub and spoke architecture, where in the hub, people could meet, could work around a whiteboard and talk. And in the spokes, people had alone time and they could concentrate. And this ability to go away and concentrate and then come back and share is very powerful. The other point highlighted is to create rituals around your deep work. For example, start your deep work session with a coffee or with some meditation or whatever. Overall, waiting for inspiration is never a good idea. Make it a habit, make it a ritual, and force yourself into this process, and the rituals will help significantly in that. Grand gestures is about doing something extravagant, something expensive to elevate the importance of the work that you're doing and therefore help you focus on the work better. J.K. Rowling is mentioned in the book that she finished the Harry Potter series in a luxury hotel suite in Edinburgh, which she paid $1,000 per day for. But doing this helped her focus on her work much better, and she was able to complete the series. And the final trick that Cal mentions is committing to a challenging deadline. I personally know the effect of a deadline increases my focus significantly. This way you can increase the intensity of your work and you will simply not have time to be distracted, and you will be able to do deep work and complete that activity on time. It's one thing to know what you should do, and it's a different thing being able to execute on them. This is where the 4 disciplines of execution come in, based on work by Chris McChesney and Sean Covey. First, you need to focus on your wildly important goals. If you focus on too many things, then you end up achieving nothing. In case of Cal, his wildly important goals was the number of papers accepted to high-ranking publications. Second, you need to act on the lead measures instead of the lag measures. The lag measures are measures that happen after the event. For example, how many papers I've submitted. The lead measures are behaviors or activities I do every day to achieve the outcome. In case of deep work, Your lead measure would be the time spent in deep work, working against your wildly important goal. Third, you need to keep a compelling scorecard and you need to make that visible. In case of deep work, this scorecard could be a calendar. Each day you can mark the number of hours you were able to work deeply, and you can even circle the days when you achieved an output that was really important to you. This will give you feedback about the number of days in sequence that you were able to work deeply, as well as gives you feedback how much time it really requires to achieve output. And fourth, you need to create accountability. This simply means taking time each week, looking at your scoreboard and making decisions based on what you see. If you had a week when you were able to concentrate and spend lots of time working deeply, you can celebrate that and learn from it. If you had a week when you were not able to do that, you can learn from that. The final topic I want to touch on is already taking us closer to the next topic, which is about downtime. This is to meditate productively, to use your time while driving, while jogging, walking, taking a shower, etc. Focus on a professional problem and work through that in your mind. I tried this. This is extremely hard. It's like an intense mental workout. I end up looping, I end up distracted, and also I end up struggling with remembering the different variables and outcomes from the work. But I do see the value of this because this way I learn to use my off times productively, as well as I build the muscle to keep my focus on a topic. So let's move on to the topic of downtime. And the basic statement is you need downtime. You cannot work all the time. Our minds are wondrous machines. Our unconscious mind is just as powerful as our conscious mind, but for different things. Your unconscious mind is good at working through large amounts of data and ambiguous problems and filters through them and comes up with a result. Our conscious mind is great at decisions that require the application of strict rules. It will calculate, it will work, and it will produce a result. By creating downtime for yourself, you create the space to use your unconscious mind. Cal also highlights that in reality, when you try to squeeze in a couple of minutes of work at night by checking your email or just trying to finish up some memos from work, that is not effective. Your mind is already tired. You should focus on giving it downtime. And typically the work you do at this time of the day is not so important, so it's better to skip that. By the way, if you focus on finishing your work by 5:30, that also gives you a time constraint. You remember earlier we talked about having a shorter time period to complete your work gives you focus. The same is true here. If you stick to finishing your work by 5:30, this will help you build the discipline to be more focused during the day. Overall, the recommendation is to put more thought into your leisure time. If you don't do that, you'll end up being distracted and wasting your downtime instead of making the best value of it. Cal talks about his shutdown procedure, which he practices every day. This is the activity he does at the end of the workday, looking at any urgent emails, making notes of important things that he needs to pick up the next day. And by tying all of these loose ends, he's able to clear this mental clutter from his head, and he finishes this activity by verbally saying shutdown complete, which just helps him in transferring from work mode to downtime mode. And this is a ritual. As I mentioned earlier, rituals are important. This is a ritual for him to finish the day. The next topic might be controversial, and frankly, at the beginning, I was a bit skeptical about this topic. It's about quitting social media. I did a bit of research and I found lots of material by Tristan Harris on YouTube arguing that your phone is a digital slot machine. It is engineered to capture your attention, and it's not by mistake that you're struggling with your phone, that you're always checking it for instant messages, for email, for this and that. It's been engineered to capture your attention because these media companies get paid for your attention. They're selling your eyeballs, and these devices and these applications are engineered to keep your eyeballs. They're using design practices from casinos to keep the phone as engaging as possible. If this argument about the digital slot machine by Tristan Harris doesn't convince you, then consider this quote from Clifford Nass, the late Stanford communications professor. He says that people who multitask all the time lose their ability to filter out irrelevancy. They just simply cannot manage their working memory. Whenever they receive a problem, a large part of their brain gets activated, which is absolutely inefficient. They are pretty much mental wrecks. I think that's a pretty harsh statement. Taking an internet Sabbath is a popular recommendation. The idea is to stop using the internet altogether for a couple of weeks or months, and this way you are able to build a distance. However, according to Cal, the internet Sabbath doesn't work because when it comes to an end, you start using the services again, and very quickly you fall back to the old pattern. So instead of the internet Sabbath, Cal recommends to do this. Instead of taking breaks from distraction, take breaks from focus. The way you implement this is you set specific times in your agenda when you're allowed to go online. And if you have a question that you want to check online, or if you have the urge to check social media or email, you have to force yourself to wait until the next set time slot for going online comes. You can set as many slots as you need. You can even check every 10 minutes. The important thing is to build this muscle to resist the temptation until your time has come, and this will create a capability for you to resist the ongoing distraction of the internet, of social media, of networked tools. All that said, Cal's recommendation is not to quit social media full stop, but to take a very deliberate approach to using social media. You can think of this as choosing the right amplifier for your craft. If you use the wrong amplifier, then the effect is not going to be what you want. If you use the right amplifier, then the social media tool that you're using, the networked tool that you're using, can elevate your work. So for example, if you're an artist and you're using Instagram to get inspiration and to publish your work, then the benefits of Instagram might actually outweigh the drawbacks. It is not about dropping everything, it's about evaluating each tool and keeping the ones that you need. Many people make the argument that social media has some value and therefore I should keep it. It gives me some entertainment, it gives me community, etc. Cal is highlighting that you should think of this more in the context of opportunity cost. You have finite time and finite attention. The question is, what do you spend your time on and what gives you the greatest reward in terms of quality of life and in terms of achievement? And he argues that just because something has some value, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should take that value, because maybe if you choose a different thing, you will get more value out of it. If you're not distracted all the time, then because you don't need to fight with attention residue, your output will be more and you'll feel better because you focused on the things that were important to you. He stresses the craftsman approach to tool selection, and he brings in an example of a farmer and the intricate thought process of evaluating whether to produce hay or to purchase hay. And he says that we should do the same. We should identify the core factors that determine success and happiness in our personal and professional lives, and then evaluate each of the social media tools that we are using against those criteria, and only keep those in our portfolio that have significant positive value that far outweigh the negative effects of that tool. Another approach recommended by Cal is called the packing party. This comes from the minimalistic movement, where you pack everything in your home into boxes, and then over the next week or month, you take out things whenever you need them and you put them back in their place. And whatever remains in the box, you move out of your home, because those are things that you really don't use, you don't need, they're just clutter in your life. So how do you do this for social media? You ban all networked tools. Networked tools mean news sites and social media and email and everything else for 30 days. And after the 30 days, you evaluate. Did you miss anything? Were people missing you? Did it have a significant negative impact on your life? If you find that some of the tools you missed and are important, you bring them back into your life. The rest you keep out. Cal says that those who went through this process, first of all, experienced significant anxiety on the first couple of days as they got used to not being able to check their social media regularly. And second, most of the people at least deleted the social media apps from their phones, so they are more deliberate to check them only on their desktop computers. And now let's move to the final part of the discussion, and that is about draining shallow work in your life. Cal mentions 4 approaches in the book for reducing the amount of shallow work and creating space for deep work. His first recommendation is to quantify the depth of every activity that you're doing. Simply think through how many months of training it would take a smart, fresh college graduate with no specialized skills in your field of work to complete the task. Second, he recommends to schedule every minute of your day. And the idea here is not that you need to get the schedule right the first time, but that every time your schedule changes, you spend time to schedule the rest of the day. So you might have a schedule from 8 to 5 in the beginning, and the task that you scheduled for 11 turns out to take much longer. Then you spend 1-2 minutes to reschedule the rest of your day and work based on that, and so on. This will make you much more deliberate about how you use your time, and this will help you remove the shallowness from your work. The third approach that Cal recommends is to ask your boss for a shallow work quota. First, of course, you need to explain him or her what shallow work and deep work is, and also you need to understand that most work requires some level of shallow work. For example, sending out invoices is shallow work, but if you don't send out invoices, you don't get paid, so it's an important part of your work. By asking for a quota, this will take off the mental burden of having this guilt that I'm forced into doing shallow work. You will have a quota, you can measure it, you can report to your boss on how you're doing against that quota, and this topic becomes manageable. And finally, you should become hard to reach. There are 3 different approaches you can take. First, Do not reply to email if any of the following applies. Nothing really good or bad would happen if you didn't reply, or if the question that's being asked is not relevant to you or doesn't interest you. And third, if the question is so ambiguous that you're unable to provide an answer or it would take extreme amount of work to give an answer. Second, make the people who send you the email do the work. You can create a form that people need to fill out, or you can add a message to your email address that people need to explicitly state why the email is important to you. There are different techniques to hand over the burden of sending you the right emails to the sender instead of you needing to process through all sorts of different materials. And third, don't just reply, but add a process in your reply. So many times a conversation about a meeting or a project, we use email like instant messaging, and there are many emails back and forth because we use it as a communication tool real time. If you spend a bit of time and you go back with a process that please provide your input by this and that date, then I'm going to review it and provide you an answer by that date, which I'm going to send to you, and I will be open to discuss this on this and this day. If you have any questions, you can lay out a process of how you want to work on the specific topic instead of leaving it open-ended, and this way you can cut back on the many back and forth emails until an agreement is reached. Most of the time, people are happy to work with the process that you propose. So this is a low friction, easy to implement approach that will cut down the number of emails that you receive. So that completes part 2 of the discussion. And again, just to recap, part 2, we started the discussion with a point about willpower and the finite nature of willpower. Then we talked about the different systems to help with deep work. We talked about the different deep work philosophies and the 4 disciplines of execution. We then moved on to talk about the importance of downtime, followed by a discussion about social media. And this very last topic was about different approaches, how you can drain the shallows and increase the amount of deep work that you're able to do. This completes my book summary of Cal Newport's Deep Work. I hope you found this useful. If you would like to get a copy of this book on a page, I included links in the video description. You can access this for a small fee that will help support my work in the future. Thank you.